Before we get to today's show, I want to invite you to join the latest Healthcare Security Cast giveaway. Thanks to my collaboration with Paul Sarnes, we'll be giving away 11 IAHSS memberships in the month of December. We want to give away at least one in each continent. If you want to enter to win in Canada and the US, text HSC giveaway to 647-372-2042. That number again is 647-372-2042, and you'll be texting HSC giveaway. Now, for anyone entering internationally, there's a few ways to get in touch with me. You can connect with me on LinkedIn and send me a message letting me know that you want to participate in the contest. If you're not on LinkedIn, you can always visit my website. It's Brian, B-R-I-N-E, Hamilton.com, B-R-I-N-E, Hamilton.com, and leave your information in the Contact Us section, and I'll be in touch with you from there. Winners will be announced later this month as we celebrate the 1-year anniversary of the Healthcare Security Cast. Thanks for listening. You have no idea how much I appreciate you, and I hope you enjoy this episode. The Healthcare Security Cast is sponsored by 3D Network Technology. Reliability is our core value. Visit www.3dnetworktechnology.com. And by Genetec, delivering security strategies for healthcare. Visit Genetec, that's GENETEC.com. And by the Change Execution Group. Visit 360lifetransformations.com.
Welcome to the Healthcare Security Cast, the podcast dedicated to healthcare security, safety, and emergency management. If you are involved with a healthcare security program or desire to be, this podcast is for you. Join the conversation as we discuss the issues that matter to healthcare security professionals while leveraging the expertise of healthcare security thought leaders and experts in personal development. And now, here's your host, Brian Hamilton.
Welcome to the Healthcare Security Cast for December 15th. I'm joined today by Mike Wanik. Mike, thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure, Brian.
And I always like to start off by learning about our guest. So I'll start off by asking you, who is Mike Wanik?
Well, it's a good question. There's two of us, so I'll tell you about me. The other one being my son. So I am a guy who grew up in New England, and during the 60s and 70s, I was really attracted to all the TV shows, Adam 12 and Emergency, and the movies, Dirty Harry, as I got into high school and things of that nature. So I always had this desire to be in law enforcement. So when I was 17 years old, I joined the Army, delayed entry, and shortly thereafter went into schooling for military police. And little did I realize that I would stay almost 9 years working in the military, loving every minute of it, getting great opportunities. Started as a uniformed military policeman, got sent to a wonderful school. No one else wanted to go. It was called field sanitation, how to dig a latrine, where to dig the latrine. But I must have done something right, because when I came back and I had an attaboy for actually performing in that school, it opened the door for many other schools after that. So I almost became a professional law enforcement student after that, because it was no more digging holes. It was more along the lines I wanted to be in. So during those years, I kind of filled multiple capacities. I was a uniformed patrolman. Everyone's basically a soldier in the military to start with. I ran a military police station. I was a criminal investigator. I worked on a drug suppression team. I had a lot of great experiences. And then in 1984, I was struck by a car in Germany, and I decided to leave the military at that time and come into the civilian world.
Excellent. Now, you talk about your career path a little bit. What was it that brought you into to healthcare security? What were the things along the way that helped you get to this the place that you're in now?
Yeah, great question. So, and I enjoy talking about it because it kind of brings a lot of things together. One, having the desire to do something in the field, and two, to realize that you audition in front of people every day and you just don't even know you're doing it while you're doing it. So doors open for you, whether you were looking for them or not. And then luck. You got to have a little bit of luck in the whole 9 yards. So for me, it was I left the military path and I came into the civilian world, and I decided, even though I had a disability, that I was going to try to go into law enforcement. And while I was waiting for the schools, because in those days, unlike today, everybody wanted to be a cop. What happened was I picked up the newspaper and someone was looking for a security manager. And so I responded to the ad and I ended up working for a contract guard firm. And the wonderful thing about it is I walked in the door, the branch manager had just quit, and there were two candidates for the job of branch manager in the eyes of the vice president from the region. And one was myself, and one was a guy who graduated West Point. And I was thinking, oh my goodness, I don't have a chance, this West Pointer is going to grab this. 30 days later, after head to head, where he gave us challenging missions and instructions, I was named the branch manager. And I just thought it was the greatest thing in the world. That exposed me to profit and loss and every kind of customer you could imagine that's in a user of security. And I have to say that unlike today, the guns, gates, and guards moniker that sits over all of us was more than ever. People really had a tough time understanding there were professionals supplying service. It was really a tougher road. But anyways, in that position, I happened to be lucky enough to bid on a major job. And that major job was an international company. And as we presented the package for guard service, they agreed to take us, but on the condition that I would move out of my branch manager role and be the project manager for that client. So that's where my comment comes from. You're always auditioning for people. You just don't even know you're doing it. So I went to this company and I was there for a couple of years when I got kidnapped by another guard company and a couple times over. Then the luck comes in, as I spoke to. I went to an ASIS meeting, and everybody on this podcast better belong to a professional organization or two, a network. And so I went to the professional meeting, and I walked up to get a Coca-Cola at the bar. And as I looked across the bar, I saw Bill Robinson, who I had worked for in Germany on the drug team back years ago. And I said, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "I retired from the military and I went to Travelers Insurance. I'm in charge of executive protection." And he said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, I live here. I grew up here." And next thing you know, it was a long night that night. And shortly after that, a door opened, as I speak of opening doors, where he had moved into a spinoff of the company called Metro Health, which later became United Healthcare, or United Health Group, as most people know it today. And he didn't have the headcount to investigate a major fraud. So he said to me, "Why don't you quit your job and why don't you come over here as a part-timer and investigate this fraud? Everyone will meet you and you'll get on the team." And that's exactly what happened. We did a $1.3 million embezzlement case in Florida with someone taking Medicare money. And that opened the door for me to go into Metro Health, which 4 days after I got there actually became United Healthcare. It was like the minnow swallowing the whale, with United Healthcare grabbing a hold of this company that had been two major insurance companies. So that put me into that space, and I stayed there for 14 years. I left I started with managing security operations east of the Mississippi River. And when I was done, I had all the international locations. I left there after 14 years to take a consulting and training position with a boutique agency based in Connecticut. And a headhunter called me one day and said, "You've got a healthcare background. I want to talk to you about this company, United Therapeutics, and want to see how you might fit into that." So it's been a long road, but it's been a fast road. It's been filled with great experiences along the way. And it's funny how you cross many of our peers multiple times on that way. And again, you're interviewing and you don't know it because people are taking notes about how you act, what you say, what you know, what you do. and your attitude. And I think keeping a positive attitude and always driving forward just continue to open doors. But the luck word, that's overarching everything.
Excellent. No, I can definitely agree to that and attest to that myself. Now, one thing that you mentioned was as is, and you gave some really solid advice there to be a part of at least one, if not more, of these industry association groups. So, which industry association groups are you a part of, and what has your experience been like with as is and other groups like that?
Yeah, so I hate to admit it, but I've been in ASIS for over 30 years. And that first guard company where the major organization asked me to be the on-site project manager, they were the ones who took me to ASIS and encouraged me to join. I got involved, and I make this recommendation to anybody who's new going into an organization. Volunteer. Volunteer to be the newsletter editor. Why? No one ever wants to do it, number one, so it's easy to get. And number two, you can interview anybody in that chapter in the industry. They will be glad to talk to you. They will give you good subject matter to write about, but you just made a connection and made an impression with someone while you were doing that. So ASIS is just an unbelievable entryway for a lot of people. During my time there, obviously I got my CPP. I am in the CSO Center right now as a member. And I was asked to contribute to the Protection of Assets Manual a few years ago. Actually, it's more than a few years now. Just talking about global security when I was running all the international operations for United Healthcare. So that was my base organization. Then, as I looked at the landscape in professional development, I liked certifications. I liked getting my CPP, and I was proud of it. So I looked over at ACP, the Association of Contingency Planners, because I thought, well, we're emergency managers, we're contingency planners, we do it every day. So I went and I looked at the organization and I said, I want to take your test for the highest level of certification as a contingency planner. And they said, you don't qualify because security managers don't do what we do. So I went and I interviewed a lot of people and put together a package, and I proved that I do what other people do, and put myself through a 2-week boot camp on Wall Street to make sure I had the terminology down, because each one of the slices of our industry has different terminology, it seems, for the same thing, although governments have now kind of straightened that out a little bit. But I was awarded my CBCP and use that in my job, not so much as doing business continuity for United Health Group at the level that people do it full time, but I had enough to be credible with those people and be the security plug-in person that could bring a couple different perspectives to the same table. So that's a great organization. IAHSS, which a lot of people are on the podcast, I'm sure have been there. I've always dabbled with IAHSS. I just haven't got into it fully because I never had the bandwidth to with everything that was going on. But great organization, great people, a lot of people in the same organizations everywhere. And then lastly, the International Security Management Association, ISMA, which is a global organization of CSOs that the requirements are your firm has to have $1 billion worth of revenue. You have to have international operations. And what does that mean? That means when you go in that room with a group of people and you have discussions on problems, you're talking to the top of the heap about how they do things, how they address things. And it's very honest and forthcoming between all the members, but also very private, that we all go by Chatham House rules where we can use the information, but you can't attribute where you got it from. Very common for those kind of things. It's probably the organization that I've gotten the most out of, just because you can have such honest conversation about real world breaking news. And sometimes it hasn't even broke yet, the news incidents in the world.
Excellent. And I'm sure just through your work with all of these groups that you've obviously, you've encountered a lot of high level professionals. Who are some of the people that you would identify as mentors, and what have you learned from them that you still apply in your career now?
Oh, well, obviously, a big part of me goes back to military. So, Orville C. Kerwood, Master Sergeant Kerwood, God rest his soul, what a great leader, taught me more about politics than anything else. And you need the political education as you gather your core education. Obviously, Bill Robinson for opening the door to me at United Health Group and even the days before that in the military working together. As time goes on, a lot of my mentors turned out to be business people. Chan Wheeler, who was the chief executive officer of the Enterprise division in United Health Group, who walked into my office one day and said, "Hey, you were in the military. Have you ever gone internationally?" And I said, "Yeah, absolutely." Next thing I know, I spent 10 years of my life running between China, Philippines, India, having a great time while I feel adding a lot of value. But Chan and a lot of the business leaders from those days taught me a lot about business. And they also taught me that security could have a vote at the table when you were talking about all hazard risks. And those business leaders that kind of got it early on, Al McMahon, who was the general counsel, those people are the ones that you not only learn from them, but they're actually learning from you that a security professional has a lot to offer a business. And I think it's pretty commonplace now, but if you go back 20 years ago, if you go pre 911 kind of thinking, everybody had the "it can't happen here." You know, the North America is an island and we're safe, and developing countries don't have the wherewithal to do something. Now they understand that you've got to have someone that understands that all. And by the way, you know, on the contingency planning, emergency management side, you also have Mother Nature who likes to get involved with these things. So when you're talking about my life, I mean, to have been involved in things like tsunamis and earthquakes, underwater earthquakes that cause tsunamis, mass killings in some countries, terrorism that's happening on the streets that your people are traversing to go to work to. It's just amazing how even the mentors get something back from us, the practitioners.
Awesome. Now, for those listening, you talk about leading a global security program, which only a few of our listeners, I'm sure, would have experience with. Now, just to give some context, what are some of the unique things that are involved in running a security program at that scale?
Wow. Well, I'd say as anywhere else, first you have to look at what's the culture of the organization, how much do they want to know or to be involved with proactively. I think you have to go show your wares. You have to socialize yourself, as I did when I came into this position, where I went to leaders who hear the word security and they think, oh, this guy's here to stop everything I'm going to do. And we have to send the message that's not correct. I am here to enable you to do whatever you need to do. I'm here to help you find solutions to get around tough situations. I'm here to have you open your eyes and look at risks that you haven't thought about, that you don't want to think about the first time you hear about it, that you're a victim. So, it's a wide and varied landscape. So I kind of talk about practicing in the areas of people, process, technology, and environment. It's kind of our who we are, where we are, what we do, what are the threats in those areas. Try to categorize them and understand. Try to understand who owns what, because in larger organizations where you think as a corporate security director, you're going to own all these things. You have other organizations, you have business continuity, you have internal audit, you have risk managers. And so you have to blend your thinking and approaches with them to figure out what program you, as the corporate security director, can supply. I can have great knowledge in an area and think I'm the most qualified person to do it, but it's another person's job. So I'm a contributor to them. So it's not in my universe. and my universe is going to be large no matter what I do, because on that day, by socializing and meeting people, you're going to get pulled into the same problems regardless. You're going to be at the table. So with people, I mean, it starts with the hiring of people, background checks, travel, where they go, international travel, duty to care, duty to warn those people as they travel into some demanding environments, potentially looking at medical evacuations, remains repatriation. It could be anything. One of the best reporting trips I've ever had, Brian, was being assigned to human resources. I've worked for the chief financial officer. I currently work for the president of the organization I'm in. And I'll have to tell you, when you work with the chief HR officer, it's great because of the fact that everything that happens involves people. And so when you're there, you not only get to be on the back end of things, you get to be on the front end of things. And that's where I say hiring, training, management training, all those things are great defenses for your company. Process, a lot of times we send people out and, whether they're nurses and they're going out at night to see patients, or they're in another country going to a medical show, if you will, those kind of things. A lot of those things just kind of happen unless someone sticks their nose in it. I like to stick my nose in it and make friends with those people. And I do it in a non-threatening way. I do it in the sense where I talk about my family and my wife and say, if my wife was going on a trip like this, I would want my counterpart to be supplying this service to her. I would expect it because that's the right thing to do to protect the person and the enterprise, so on and so forth. Basically, by socializing those things, you start to get support and you get a process together that becomes a formal process, and you get to leverage some of the relationships you had, like with finance, for instance. I'll give you an example where if I want someone to travel in a certain way and do certain things so they have visibility on my radar screen and that I can support them and that I can protect the enterprise, and they don't want to play, I go to the finance leader and I say, anybody that doesn't book a trip in Checkpoint with me, can you deny their expenses? Oh, absolutely. And now you have everyone's attention, and now you've created the process to get yourself in there. So sometimes you have to learn that goes back to the political thing Sergeant Kerwood told me. You just can't get you're from point A to point B directly. You've got to kind of figure out how you can do this, where you're going to get your way in. Technology, I don't do technology from the cyber side, if you will. I like to say that when it comes to cyber events, I'm responsible for the behavior of the people more than the behavior of the data, which the CIO and the CISO are more paying attention to. Obviously, that's their job. But technology, I'm talking about the things that help us in the workspace, all our access control and video and IP intercom, all those systems fall into my technology. But also I start to look at other things like man down alarms and other types of devices that provide value to protect the enterprise and its people. And then in the environment, of course, you can look at whether it's domestic or foreign. You could look at using things like CAP Index or a tool like that to identify what are your risks in certain areas you can't get to. Or when you're talking about intelligence and breaking news all over the place, I like to say that we want to be the heartbeat of information, if you will, in the company. I want to gather all that data, that raw data, into our organization and process it and try to put up the barriers to the risks that we see or start early response to emergency. Then you get into things like financial fraud, and there's just so many areas that you can be in. But as I said, there are other owners in here also. So you may not own it, but you may be a key contributor to it, or you may be the subject matter expert for certain levels where it crosses a threshold, and then they need you. And just as an example on that is a simple fraud case, whether it's healthcare fraud, use of someone's number or what have you, a false doctor somewhere with a post office box that's filling up with checks. We have people that are very good at understanding what happens, and they surround us because they're professionals, but they usually don't have the knowledge of how to present that on a silver platter so that a case will get prosecuted or adjudicated in whatever the arena it is. So just being able to walk that middle ground and knock on the door of an investigator who looks at a corporate security leader much different than some of the other entities that are out there.
Excellent. Now, the one thing too, I want to actually congratulate you on your team being named to the Security 500 list. Obviously, obviously a great honor. Now, you had mentioned when we spoke previously that your organization was previously listed as listed in the pharmaceuticals category, and then that was obviously prior to being moved to healthcare. Can you give us some insight as to what exactly your organization is about, what their mission is, and some of the things that you're doing in the healthcare space?
Absolutely. I'm really proud to talk about this. So, when I was recruited to this company, the CEO, she was my final interview, and she said, "Why would you want to come here after being at the size company that you were?" And I think in those days, United Health Group was like 90,000 people. I think now it's almost 300,000. So that's pretty wild. But she was curious, and I said, I am excited about where you're going. I'm excited about the future of the business, if you will, because the business is medicine and it's all smart people. The history of the company is it's focused on pulmonary arterial hypertension and end stage organ disease. And the reason for that is the CEO's daughter is a victim of this disease, and there were no cures or remedies on the market. So our CEO, who then was the CEO of Sirius Radio, took her monies and invested them to try to find a cure to save her daughter. And she ultimately did. And so we sit here roughly 25 years later, and we're in a $5 billion market cap company that is based on the science to help people with PAH. But what's been exciting is that beyond the drugs that we have on the market, and we also have a pediatric oncology drug right now, we are doing cutting edge science, and it's just amazing what's happening. So for instance, we're doing ex vivo perfusion, and this is where a human lung that has been donated but doesn't meet the requirements to be transplanted into a human, it will come to us in Silver Spring, Maryland, and within a period of 6 to 8 hours, this lung will be rehabilitated and can go back out and save someone's life. So right now, we're somewhere in the area north of 200 patients that were waiting in line for lungs that weren't able to get a transplanted lung. They went into the system that we have right now as we're developing this technology, and they're living. Xenotransplantation, that's kind of taking the organs of other animals and transplanting them into humans. So right now we're looking at taking lungs, kidneys, and the hearts of porcine pigs and moving them into human beings. And as your listeners probably can imagine, I have some issues of people's thoughts about what that is, non-patient people, shall we say. Third way to go here is taking and printing lung scaffolds and doing that with a 3D printer utilizing collagen and forming the scaffold, and then taking human cells and implanting them on the scaffold to grow a human lung. So, I mean, the hits just keep on coming. We've got a group in Sudbury, Massachusetts that's making artificial lungs. And the people I'm surrounded with are just absolutely brilliant. They're amazing that they can think outside the box, as the old saying goes, but then they can actually find the science to do it. You have to have the vision, and then you have to have the ability to execute, and they have that. We're also doing implantable pumps, which are coming out right now. And if you just think of someone who has a pump on their hip that's pushing drugs into them, and how that affects their lifestyle with regards to bathing or swimming and things of that nature. We are on the cusp of releasing implantable pumps for one of our drugs that would, just as I said, go under the skin and deliver a quality of life to a patient beyond the drugs. And then up in Canada, up your way, Brian, we are doing a lot of research on drones. And we're talking about utilizing drones to move the human organs and the developed organs by air to reduce the amount of time to get them from point A to B. So our company is just amazing in what it does. And so as we kind of started with making a drug for a base of 3,000 people that had no cure. The 3,000 people are now north of 40,000 people because they're living because of the science. The drugs get better every day. And now we're looking at all these projects, I'll call them right now, ex vivo, Xeno, the scaffold that I spoke of. All these projects are going to eventually come to light. And I love it when our CEO, Martine, talks and she says, you know, your grandparents are walking around and they're still flying the B-52 bombers that they flew back in the day. And what do? They just change the parts to keep them going. That's what's happening with the human body. We're going to be changing parts and living longer. And it's great to be part of that as we go forward. Having been mentioned on the Security 500 list under this is wonderful because I had talked to the magazine and told them that, yeah, we're a biotech. We're doing some interesting things. We have a unique partner, Dean Kamen, the guy who invented the Segway, and you ought to hear what vision he has about where science is going. Limb regeneration for soldiers in the field, just amazing stuff. So they put us in the healthcare category, and my crew is happy to be there, and our leadership is proud to be there as well.
Awesome. Actually, since you mentioned your crew, can you speak to us about the structure of your team?
Sure, we're a lean and mean company, and our CEO is very conscious of the market and what Wall Street thinks about money because it's a fact of life. But she also believes that we can plug and play with the best as you need them. So it's kind of like when I talk to people about security careers, I say you can be a specialist or a generalist, you know, and the generalist that's me in this case. I can juggle cats, I can do what we need to do. And if I need to get to some point where I need a subject matter expert on whatever it is, I can pull someone in if I need them for a day or a week. Now, if I need them for 10 years, can we hire them? Absolutely. But our culture is stay lean and mean and bring in people as we need. So in security, I kind of follow that same leadership model. So I have a deputy, Michael King, and Mike came to work for us with one of the guard vendors. In fact, I was not happy with this particular vendor on the day I met Mike, and he was brought in as a senior person to, as the company said, if anyone could save this job, it will be Mike. And they were right. And then I decided to kidnap him and asked him to join the organization. I was going to let the vendor stay and him be there, and they reacted adversely to that. And long story short, the vendor went away in the 11th hour. By the way, they said, "Okay, we'll do it your way." I said, "Too late. We've already moved on." Mike moved over. He became the contract leader, and I think it was within 18 months he was brought into staff as the number two. Auditioned his way all the way through the thing, if you will. Because of that, we stay lean and mean. We have two major contract companies. One's a Canadian company and one is a US company. Both supply project managers. When I take those project managers into our fold, the word from the mountaintop to the vendors are these people will be security professionals and they will do what they need to do for your company to, you know, get people paid and ensure guards are uniformed and so on and so forth. but at the end of the day, I want them to be a security professional supporting my organization. So those two managers operate in that vein. What we've done lately is pull them off the job and say, we're going to let your number two develop and do the basic security management on the job today. And we're going to take you off and say, go home and I want you to work on this project and do this project and come back in 2 weeks. And that's been good because we're not only helping out our manager, we're helping out the number two get confidence in being able to operate on the site and do their work. We pull in a lot of consultants for different types of work, and we consult internally to the people that I mentioned before to try to send our message and build our thoughts and protocols into other people's organizations, and we have a lot of luck with that. So an example of that is travel. I will be all over travel and travel risk management and so on and so forth, but I don't own travel and I don't need to own travel. I just need to be the SME with my people supplying that. So with the three people I spoke of, those three people lift a lot of weight. They use a lot of tools to monitor the environment, and we're not afraid to bring in key vendors to do certain things when we need to react.
Excellent. Now, you also touched on, I guess, some of the things that you're doing in your program to develop leaders, career pathing, personal development. Is there any other opportunities that you didn't cover that exist within your team?
It's funny when each of them came on, I said your resume will look a lot different in a year from now than when you did before. And I think developing leaders. We had a discussion this morning, and we were just talking about how it's easy to get complacent even if you're doing the right things. And we started to pull it apart. And I would say that having team meetings where you're honest with yourself and can comment about peers organization or input into the organization and vice versa, I think it's very healthy. So I think the development is, a lot of it is learning to discuss the management aspects of the tasks that we're doing or the expectation of what the organization asks us to provide. It's funny because I'm just getting a remark that was made to me. It just popped into my head from our CEO. I was about 2 years into the job, and I think everyone's heard the old phrase, you don't know what you don't know, right? And that's all of us.
Right.
We don't. And she walked into my office and she said, I just want to tell you something. And I said, what's that? And she said, when you came here, I thought that you were I'm trying to think of the word she used, a very nice to have thing here. She didn't see it as mandatory. And she goes, within the time you've been here and the things you've talked about, I don't know how we, couldn't go forward without you at this point. Not me, but the position, obviously. So when you talk about development, it's really talking to those people and making them understand that there's a reason why we talk to some of our customers the way we do. It's not only for today, where we're trying to create programs for tomorrow, and each one of those programs get associated with that manager who's driving it. And I think they develop when they have more interaction with managers from other areas within the business, and pretty soon they can brand themselves in such a way. You're the healthcare security leader. You're the person who takes all the raw data and analyzes it and gives me a product, whatever it is. And each one of those steps kind of develops someone into the generalist that I spoke of, right? Because I don't think we're developing people into being specialists. They're going to go for schooling for that. But to be a good generalist, you have to have exposure to so many things and get your feet wet with it. And you got to get burned a couple times too, because that allows you to get a lifelong learning, if nothing else, on what not to do. I think there's a lot of that all baked in there. Sorry to ramble on there a bit, Brian, but I don't think there's a black and white kind of answer to that.
No need to apologize at all. It's all good stuff. Now, I have actually kind of a broad question for you, and it kind of ties into a lot of what we've spoken about as far as leadership and mentorship. So I just kind of want to get your thoughts on leadership and mentorship. What are your approach, and what are some of the important elements of both leadership and mentorship?
Yeah, leadership. Everyone's always watching you, and I come back to my military days where it's set the example and walk the walk and talk the talk. Be who you are. Um, Mentorship is, I think, taking people along for the ride, showing them the value of what you're doing and why you're doing things. I really enjoy mentoring people. I get a kick out of people understanding something at a whole new level, where the light bulb goes on over their head and go, oh, that's why. This morning in the call we were talking about, as I said, we do things, but I just don't feel the energy. And we said, do our people understand why we do things? Or did we just tell them we do 1, 2, 3, 4 because it's standard and repeatable and you can know it? And I'm an advocate of the fact that as you start to give the people the whys, and then they start to couple the whys together, and then they ask more questions of you, you're actually developing the person into the next generation leader. Because how do we bring people up in our industry? You either go to school and then you come out of some kind of schooling and try to find a job based on your qualifications. You're ex-military, ex-law enforcement, ex-whatever, and you decide that looks like a great career. I'll go over there. And sometimes they have a path that's not as tough because someone likes the panache of having, an ex ABC person in their organization, whatever it may be. Or there's people that come up from the inside. And when you look at the inside track, my opinion is we as an industry have done a poor job of that, of bringing people through the pipe upwards and to replace us. We should be training our replacements internally. We should be, taking all the lessons we learned from other people and imparting them on them and let them, as they develop, figure out which ones are good for them, because not everything's good. Let them throw away the ones that are not, adapt it to the culture they are in, and go into it. So I think you're continually mentoring and developing people if they're in your inner circle, but the outer circle is always looking at you and making judgments, even if they're not talking to you. And you have to be conscious of that.
Excellent. Now, I kind of want to go in a different direction, and I just want to get your thoughts on another thing. You're obviously really big on personal development. Would you have a book recommendation or recommendations for the audience?
Wow, this will be a weird one because I'm reading it right now, and I'm a fan of history. I think history repeats itself. So I'm reading Grant and about the U.S. General Grant, and if you've seen the book, I'm also getting a workout trying to hold the book up in bed because it's building up my biceps because it's one of those 700-page books. But what you don't know about someone, and your judgment of face value of someone, it could be just so amazing. I had no idea what this man had been through and how he developed himself and how he beat opinions of people who thought that he was a drunkard and so on and so forth. And I just think that if you ever think you can't do something, you have to read a book about someone who got to the mountaintop, and you have to realize that they just didn't wake up there one day. They fought their way up there. And I think just having the confidence that you get is that's what's important in development. I think attitude and swagger is a lot of it, right? To be able to look someone in the eyes and talk and describe not only what you're going to do, but why you're doing it and how you would do it and how you would factor in the the cultural aspects or the environmental aspects that affect it, so that you could get to where you want to be, which is success. And I think, to look at Grant, who was looked upon as a drunkard, who ended up being the number one general in the U.S. Civil War, who ended up being the president of the United States, just amazing. So I'll only say that book today because I'm reading it right now, but that's why I'm reading it, because I love that kind of history.
Excellent. And in light of the pandemic, one thing that's been getting a lot of attention recently, and rightfully so, is just the necessity to take care of ourselves mentally and check in on our employees. What are some of the things that you're doing to, just make sure that you're taking care of your mental health during this time?
Oh, for me, it's been easy. COVID's been a horrible thing this year in the United States, but for me, because we're trying to reduce our footprint in the drug manufacturing plants, and I'm based at the headquarters, which we also manufacture drugs there, I'm able to work from home. And in this year, instead of commuting 800 miles a week to go back and forth to work, I'm sitting at my dining room table. I'm enjoying my family. I had two granddaughters born this year, one a week ago today, and I get to see them and touch them. It's just been wonderful. So my mental health in COVID has been the best it's been in 5 years. Yeah, but not saying anything negative about my job. As far as with the staff, we touch base with each other, and it's it is a little bit tough because you tend to get a little farther apart as time goes on, or you get to be a little bit more short in your conversation. It's more business and not enough understanding what the person's total life is, what have you. And we're all friends. I would say that we're associates. We row in the right direction, but it is a little bit tough not being around everyone right there. I probably could do a little better job, quite honestly.
Oh, fair enough. It obviously it's a situation that nobody expected, and it's been an adjustment for everybody. So, I think everybody's just doing their best.
And I bet you they've been in my desk and got all my good stuff. That's no, only kidding. Didn't mean it, Mike. It was fun.
Now, is there anything that I haven't asked you yet that you would like to discuss?
Yeah, I kind of been around some of the same messages. I think that myself, if someone is a generalist and someone is a believer that they can accomplish missions with their head down, that's half the battle. They've got to be a lifelong learner, but being a lifelong learner doesn't mean it has to be all formal education. It has to be formal, informal. I'm a fan of certifications. I'm a fan of short bursts of knowledge that give you enough to be dangerous. And then if you want to go deeper, you certainly can. But, if you don't know something exists, I think that you're behind the power curve and won't be successful. So just knowing that a tactic or a protocol or a piece of equipment exists is half the battle. We talked about ASIS and jobs like that. I believe you've definitely, as you're in your first years in our industry, you really need to get involved and ask people to share their knowledge in those meetings. It's pretty funny that I look at some chapters of organizations and they'll tell you when the meeting's going to be, they're going to tell you what's for lunch. And then for the speaker, will say to be determined, and it's like, Brian, what are you doing today? Hey, you're on. You know, ask people that surround you that can impart some wisdom from the dais to go up, and they'll do it for you. I think that learning in those environments and sharing and networking is what it's all about. And then the other thing I would say here is I think the guns, gates, and guards moniker that's been over security for many years is one that gets sunsetted each year a little bit farther. But it's time to really not only push that over the edge for professional corporate security managers, but to kind of be on the other side of it and point to security officers and say the security officers, and I myself slip now and then, I've done it during this podcast, and call them guards. They're not guards, they're officers. It's a profession. There are some fantastic people there. We talked about developing them. And I think we have to let our people know, if they don't realize it, that this staff is there for the benefit of all. They devote a lot of time to operations. And when you don't hear anything going on, right, it's the biggest thing we fight. When it's quiet and it's not on fire, no one knows security exists. But why is it not on fire? Because security exists. So we need to send the message that those officers, I'm so proud of our officers during COVID-19, going to work every day, not abusing the system. I said, hey, we manufacture drugs. If you think you're sick, don't come to work and we'll make sure you get paid. Don't worry about your sick time. Don't worry about your PTO time. And we only had one person that came forward, and he was in a real situation. He didn't even stay out the majority of the time. That's how professional those people are. And we need to make sure everyone understands that message and continues to increase the wages and benefits for our security officers that are out there every day for the public.
Excellent. And one thing that you just made me think of when you were mentioning your team, it seems as if your team, even though they're an outsourced service provider, they obviously really feel like they're a part of the team, where they're comfortable following the direction that you've given. Is that something that you would say is accurate?
I think so. We have Class A facilities. We treat all our officers like they're employees. They have access to food and whatever an employee has, they have access to. We took up all the traditional security officer uniforms and we got rid of them, and we went with golf shirts and cargo pants so that they fit in with the culture of the organization. We just bonused everybody for the holidays. We feel strong about our people. I want to do more. One of the things in the United States market is, we still need to figure out what healthcare looks like, because that's a wild card in cost. And I think it keeps a lot of organizations just a half step behind on doing what they probably want to do, because they don't know if there's a new surprise cost around the corner any day, or they're doing it already and it's baked in at one number and you just don't know what the new number would be. But I think that with good partner organizations, and I think that's the other side of it, Brian, the companies themselves beyond the officers, they've become so much more true security providers than guard companies. They've got a lot of knowledge in there. There's a lot of good brain power in there. Same thing with our technology companies. I couldn't survive without my technology companies.
Awesome. Now, as far as yourself, or even with your team, what can we look forward to seeing from you in the near future?
It's kind of funny because there's like common themes in here. So I get a lot of phone calls from people that are transitioning from government or military and saying, "What do I do? How do I do it?" And I think that when I pull the curtain down on this act, because I don't think I have the bandwidth to do both, I'm thinking of creating kind of the transition course, the try to give you an idea of what you should know that you don't know. And it's very interesting because a lot of us will sit here today and go, well, what does that mean? It's like, well, before you got in the position that you did, how did you learn how to read blueprints, and how did you learn how to spec out jobs and understand what the risk was to your organization, and fire systems, and all these things that some of us take for granted because someone mentored us along the way and exposed us to something and we learned a little bit and we did something. It's like, for someone who's trying to transition And that goes to out of college too, right? You got a degree, but what does that mean? You don't have any practical experience. Kind of take and put together a program here that would have value to give people an idea of what they're looking at and where they're weak so that they can focus a little better. I kind of been playing with that in my mind as something to do.
Excellent. Now, in closing, is there a message that you would like to share with the Healthcare Security Cast community?
Yeah, thanks for letting me be associated with everybody. It's definitely my pleasure. I found healthcare even when I was working for United Health Group, and it was mainly in data and security of data in developing countries and people supporting that, so on and so forth. Healthcare is just a very, very interesting space that encompasses so much and has so many demands. And as we all know, goes 24/7, 365, and it doesn't go 4 miles an hour. It goes 75 miles an hour. And, I think back to just what goes on in a healthcare environment. And when you understand what a security officer has to do when he intervenes with management of aggressive behavior with someone, what you need to do in a fire to evacuate properly, all the things that this community has to do 24/7 with the buildings always full, always full. I think it's an amazing job that you do, and I think that's about it, Brian.
Excellent. What is the best way for us to connect with you?
I've got a LinkedIn page, Michael Wanik, Wanik, and if you want to shoot me an email, MWANIK at UNITHER.com, Unither, Mwanik at Unither.com. It's on my LinkedIn profile. It's all over the net too.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Michael. I appreciate it. And, it was just great learning about your organization and the work that you're doing.
Ryan, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for reaching out. I guess people do read Security Magazine, huh? Some good friends there too. They're carrying some good messages.
And this concludes another episode of the Healthcare Security Cast. Join us again next week when we're joined by a new guest with a new topic. And don't forget to listen to episode 4 of the Proactive Security Podcast with myself and Mike Hodges later today. If you haven't had a chance to check it out yet, the Proactive Security Podcast is a monthly podcast focusing on workplace violence prevention in the healthcare environment. Also, in case you missed it at the top of the show, we're celebrating the 1-year anniversary of the Healthcare Security Cast with another Healthcare Security Cast giveaway. Thank you to Paul Sarnes for helping me out on this one, but we're going to be giving away 11 IAHSS memberships this month. We want to give away at least one in each continent. To enter from Canada or the US, text HSC giveaway to 647-372-2042. That's 647-372-2042. To enter internationally, let me know that you want to join the contest by contacting me on LinkedIn. Or if you're not on LinkedIn, reach out to me on my website. That's Brian, BRINE, Hamilton.com, BRINE, Hamilton.com, and you'll just use the Contact Us section. Until next time, stay safe and take care.